The CEO's memo was clear and cold. "You are explicitly banned from this site. Do not return." She gave no reason to the single father, just a painted-over past. But when a scheduling error brought him to her luxury office door, brush in hand, her secret reason for banning him was a truth neither of them could escape. The painter is Leo Walsh. The CEO is Clara Vance. To her board, she banned a risky contractor. To his daughter, he just lost the biggest job of the year. But this wasn't about business. It was about a night 7 years ago, a secret they both buried, and a single decision that would force them to rewrite the story they've been telling themselves ever since. The real question was never why she banned him. It was why she was so terrified he'd look her in the eye. Leo Walsh's world was built on two things: the steady rhythm of a paint roller and the laugh of his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. For 8 years, since the day she was born, he'd been the only parent she'd known. His business, Walsh Finishes, was a one-man operation specializing in the meticulous, old-world techniques for high-end interiors. He didn't just paint walls, he restored them. And for the last 3 years, he'd been the ghost behind the flawless surfaces in some of the city's most prestigious offices. His work was impeccable, his references sterling, which is why the contract from Vance Innovations was supposed to be a lock. Vance Innovations was the gleaming crown of the city's tech corridor, and Clara Vance, at 34, was its youngest-ever CEO, a figure of relentless ambition and controlled image. She had taken over from her father 2 years prior, and her mandate was clear: modernize, expand, project unshakable stability. The company's new flagship headquarters, a $50 million renovation, was her statement piece. Every vendor, from the architects to the caterers, was vetted by her personally. Leo had submitted his bid through the proper channels. His portfolio passed the first round, then the second, then silence. The rejection email arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was 3 sentences long. It stated that Walsh Finishes did not meet the current project's risk profile and that the decision was final. No phone call, no returned voicemail. Leo read it 3 times, standing in the small kitchen of his duplex, the sunrise painting Maya's cereal bowl orange. Risk profile. He'd painted buildings with more security than the Pentagon without a single incident. He called the project manager, a man named Derek, who stammered and said the directive had come from the top. He wouldn't elaborate. Clara's memo to the procurement team was more blunt. It was dated the same day. One line in the middle was underlined: "The painter, Leo Walsh, is to be removed from consideration. Do not engage. This is not a negotiation." When her assistant, a keen-eyed young man named Ben, had cautiously asked if there was a reason to document for compliance, Clara had simply said, "personal discretion." A vague, dangerous term in corporate governance, but she was the CEO. Her discretion was the final word. What Leo didn't know was that Clara had seen his name and his photograph in the vendor file and felt the floor of her 42nd floor office tilt. It wasn't his business that was the risk. It was his face. It was the memory it dragged up from a lifetime ago, from a version of herself she had systematically erased. 7 years ago, Clara wasn't Clara Vance, CEO. She was Clara Simmons, a first-year associate at a cutthroat corporate law firm, drowning in debt and anxiety. And one freezing November night, at a bar after a soul-crushing victory, she had met a quiet, kind man with paint under his fingernails who made her forget the person she was trying to become. They spent one unplanned, secretive weekend together. He was a respite. She was, for him, a mystery. They parted without exchanging numbers, a mutual, silent agreement that their worlds were too far apart. He went back to his life. She went back to hers, eventually marrying into the Vance family and burying Clara Simmons forever. She thought that was the end of it, until his bid landed on her desk. The background check attached to his file confirmed it. Single father, sole proprietor, no red flags, except for one: him. To Clara, his presence was a live wire snaking into her perfectly constructed world. A single dad painter was a story. A single dad painter who had once known her as a struggling, vulnerable stranger was a catastrophe waiting to happen. What if he talked? What if someone connected the dots? In the high-stakes theater of her boardroom, perception was everything. So she banned him. It was a preemptive strike, fueled by panic disguised as protocol. But corporate machinery is prone to glitches. 2 weeks after the ban, a scheduling software error at the general contractor's office failed to sync the updated vendor list. Leo received an automated dispatch ticket for a pre-construction walkthrough at the Vance Innovation site. It was for 8 a.m. on a Thursday. He stared at the ticket. It was a mistake, he was sure, but it was also a $50,000 contract. A contract that would secure Maya's next year of school, his health insurance, a breathing room he hadn't had in months. He made a decision. He would go. He would be professional, invisible, perfect. If they turned him away, so be it. But he had to try. That Thursday morning, Leo arrived at the half-constructed luxury office suite. He wore clean work clothes, his tools in a worn but orderly box. The foreman, busy with a plumbing issue, waved him toward the main executive area. "They're doing the lighting check. Go ahead and start your measurements." The space was a skeleton of drywall and concrete, but you could see the money in the lines. And standing in the center of the raw space, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows, was Clara Vance. She was in a razor-sharp red suit, her dark hair pulled back, pointing at a blueprint with a junior architect. Her voice, cool and authoritative, echoed in the empty room. Leo froze at the edge of the light. He recognized her instantly. Not as Clara Vance, the tech titan whose face was on magazine covers, but as Clara, from the bar. From the weekend that had, in his lonelier moments, felt like a ghost story he'd told himself. The air left his lungs. He took an involuntary step back, his boot scuffing against a loose piece of drywall. The sound made her turn. Her eyes scanned past him, then snapped back. The blueprint fluttered from her hand, all the color drained from her face. Her hand flew to her mouth, but not before a small, sharp gasp escaped. It was a sound of pure, unguarded shock. The architect beside her stammered, "Ms. Vance, are you all right?" She didn't hear him. She was staring at Leo, her eyes wide with a tumult of emotions, recognition, terror, and a dawning, horrifying realization. The secret was no longer buried. It was standing 30 feet away, holding a tape measure, and in that suspended second, the entire carefully crafted edifice of her new life began to crack. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a vacuum, sucking all the sound from the room, all the air from their lungs. For 5 seconds, the only movement was the dust motes dancing in the morning light between them. Clara Vance's hand remained clamped over her mouth, her eyes locked on Leo's. The junior architect, confused, bent to pick up the fallen blueprint. "Ms. Vance." Clara's CEO instincts, the ones forged in 1,000 boardroom battles, kicked in a fraction of a second too late. She lowered her hand, her expression smoothing into a mask of strained professionalism. "I'm fine." A moment of vertigo. Her voice was tight, but it was a voice that commanded. She turned to the architect. "Give us the room, please. 5 minutes." "But the lighting." 5 minutes. The young man retreated, shooting a puzzled glance at Leo as he left. The heavy door to the suite clicked shut. They were alone. Clara didn't move from her spot. Leo, his heart hammering against his ribs, set his tool box down slowly. He said the only thing that felt true. "Clara." She flinched at the sound of her old name. "You're not supposed to be here." The words were icy, automatic. "The dispatch said 8 a.m., he said, holding up his phone, the ticket displayed. "It was a mistake." "A mistake," she repeated, the word dripping with a bitterness that seemed to surprise even her. She finally moved, walking toward him not with warmth but with the deliberate, predatory grace of someone cornered. 7 years. You look the same." "You don't," Leo said softly, and she didn't. The woman he'd known had soft edges, anxious eyes, a laugh that sounded like it was escaping. This woman was all hard angles and controlled fury. "You banned me. Personal discretion." That's what they said. "It is personal," she shot back, stopping a few feet away. Her perfume, something expensive and cold, reached him. "You showing up here now after all this time, it's an impossible coincidence. Or it's not. Which is it, Leo?" The accusation hung in the air. He understood then. She didn't just remember him, she saw him as a threat, a calculated one. The realization stung more than the rejection. You think I what? Tracked you down to do what? Blackmail you for a painting job? He shook his head, a dry laugh escaping. I didn't even know who you were until 30 seconds ago. Vance, Clara Vance. I read about your father's retirement in the business section. I didn't connect it. Why would I? She studied his face, searching for a lie. She saw only the same quiet honesty that had disarmed her a lifetime ago, now mixed with confusion and a rising anger. Then why are you here? She demanded, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Because I need the work, the words burst out of him, louder than he intended. He took a breath, running a hand through his hair. I have a daughter, Clara. Maya, she's 7. This contract, its stability, it's her future. I got a ticket, I came, that's it. The mention of a daughter hit Clara like a physical blow. Her eyes flickered, the mask cracking for an instant to reveal something raw and wounded. A daughter, she echoed. Yes, and I'm all she has. He let that sit between them, a fact as solid as the concrete floor. So you can have me thrown out, you probably will, but before you do, I want to know why, really why, not risk profile. Why me? Clara turned away, walking to the vast window. The city sprawled beneath her, a kingdom she ruled. Her reflection in the glass showed a face at war with itself. The secret wasn't just a weekend. It was a chain of decisions that led from that weekend to this moment. She spoke to his reflection. My life is not my own. It hasn't been since the day I married Thomas Vance. It's a brand, a corporate asset. Every detail is managed, every past narrative curated. She turned back to him, her eyes fierce. You are an unmanaged detail, a narrative I cannot control. So I'm a PR problem, Leo said, the pieces clicking into a cynical, ugly shape. It's more than that, she said, and for the first time he heard genuine fear beneath the anger. My marriage, it's a partnership, a business arrangement with very specific terms. My husband is 30 years my senior. The prenuptial agreement I signed has a morality clause, a broadly defined one. Any behavior, past or present, that could bring the family or the company into disrepute gives him grounds to void it, to remove me from the company, to leave me with nothing. Leo stared at her. A weekend from 7 years ago is disrepute. To the old money board members who never wanted me, to the media that watches my every move, a secret affair with a tradesman before my marriage, it wouldn't be a scandal, it would be a confirmation of every whispered prejudice they have about me, that I'm an opportunistic social climber, that I'm not one of them. It would be used to unravel everything I've built. She hugged herself, a vulnerable gesture that clashed with the red power suit. When I saw your bid, I panicked. I thought if you were around, someone might find out, might remember, so I erased you. The truth was both simpler and more devastating than he'd imagined. It wasn't about him. It was about her fear. Her fortress of glass and steel was built on sand. He was just a reminder of the tide. He felt his anger soften, replaced by a weary understanding. So what now? You call security. Clara was silent for a long moment. She was calculating, her mind racing through scenarios. Throwing him out was the cleanest move, but it also left a loose end, a bitter, unemployed loose end who now knew her secret. The project manager who let this slip will be fired by noon, she said, her voice all business again. The error will be buried. As for you, she met his gaze. You want the contract. The question was so unexpected it took him a second to process. What? The contract, the $50,000, do you want it? He was wary. Of course I do, but under what conditions? That I sign an NDA, that I pretend I never knew you. Yes, she said simply. And more, you get the contract. You do the work to your usual impeccable standard, but you and I never speak of the past. You never ever mention my former name. You treat me as CEO Vance, a client you've never met before. And when the job is done, we go our separate ways forever. A clean, professional transaction that leaves no trace. It was a lifeline. It was also a cage. He would be paid, but he'd have to swallow the injustice, collaborate in the erasure of their shared history, and become a paid accomplice in her fiction. The price of stability was his dignity. And if I say no, then you leave now. You will not work on this site or on any major project my company's vendors are involved with for the foreseeable future. I will make sure of it. The threat was delivered calmly, matter-of-factly. It was the power imbalance made flesh. She held his livelihood in her hands. Leo looked out the window at the city where he'd built a small, honest life. He thought of Maya's school tuition due next month. He thought of the constant tightness in his chest when bills arrived. He thought of the pure, uncomplicated pride in his work. This offer tainted all of it, but saying no meant certain struggle, with no guarantee he could recover. "I need the contract," he said finally, the words tasting like ash. "But I won't lie if directly asked." "You won't be asked," Clara said, a flicker of relief in her eyes. She extended her hand not to shake but as a symbol of the deal. "Then we have an agreement. Welcome to the Vance Innovations project, Mr. Walsh. Your foreman will be given your revised schedule today." He looked at her hand, then back at her face. The woman from the bar was gone, completely subsumed. He didn't take her hand, he simply nodded. "I'll get my measurements." He worked in a daze for the next hour, the laser level feeling heavy in his hands. The foreman, now excessively polite, assigned him a helper. The word had come down from the summit. Walsh was back on the job. No explanation. Around 10 a.m., as Leo was marking baseboard lines, he saw Clara again. She was leading a tour for what looked like investors, older men in bespoke suits. She was animated, confident, telling a story about innovation. Her eyes swept over him as if he were a piece of furniture. The dismissal was complete. He packed up at noon. As he was loading his truck in the underground garage, a black sedan pulled up silently beside him. The rear window slid down. It was Clara. She had changed into a different suit. "A word, Mr. Walsh." He leaned against his truck, saying nothing. "This stays between us," she said, her voice low. "Any breach, any hint of this getting out, and the contract is void. Immediately. With cause, do you understand?" "I understand the terms," Leo said flatly. "Good." She started to roll the window up, then paused. "Your daughter, Maya, is she well?" The question was so incongruous, so utterly disconnected from the corporate threat of a moment before, that it threw him. He saw a flicker of the old Clara, a ghost of curiosity, of human connection. It made him angrier than her threats. "She's perfect," he said, and got into his truck. The first week of the job was a study in surreal tension. Leo worked on the executive wing, sanding and priming the very offices where Clara held court. They passed in hallways. He'd smell her perfume, she'd feel his presence. Not a word was exchanged, but the air crackled with the unspoken. Her assistant, Ben, began making unexplained visits to the site, watching Leo work, asking the foreman pointed questions about his punctuality, his materials. It was clear Clara was having him monitored. Meanwhile, in the rarefied air of the executive floor, Clara was fighting a different battle. Her husband, Thomas Vance, was preparing to step down as chairman of the board. The succession was to be formalized in 2 months. Every move she made was under a microscope. A board member named Arthur Croft, an old ally of her father-in-law, had begun asking uncomfortable questions about vendor selection and cost overruns. He had somehow gotten a copy of the initial vendor list and seen Walsh finishes on it, then off it, then back on it. He emailed Clara directly, asking for a clarification on the procurement anomaly. Clara's response was a masterpiece of deflection, citing scheduling conflicts and revised scope. But Croft wasn't satisfied. He was a bloodhound for instability, and he had a source inside the procurement department, the very project manager, Derek, who was now terrified of being fired for the scheduling error. Derek, trying to save his own skin, began whispering to Croft that the CEO had taken a special personal interest in this particular painter, and not in a good way. The walls were starting to close in, and Clara's fear began to morph into something more dangerous, paranoia. She started to believe Leo's arrival wasn't a mistake at all, but the first move in a plot. Who had sent him? A rival? Croft. Her own husband testing her loyalty. Her mind, trained to see patterns of power and betrayal, constructed elaborate conspiracies where Leo was the pawn. Leo, oblivious to the boardroom chess game, was just trying to do his job and go home to Maya. He found himself working late, the site empty and quiet, the piece of balm. One evening, as he was burnishing a final coat of lacquer on a mahogany panel, he heard footsteps. He turned, expecting a security guard. It was Clara. She was alone, no suit jacket, her sleeves rolled up. She looked tired, younger. "It's after 8, she said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "I lose track of time when it's finished work," he replied, not stopping his gentle, circular motions with the rag. She walked over, looking at the panel. The wood gleamed under the work lights, deep and rich. "My father would have loved this. He was a carpenter before the money." Leo paused, surprised by the confession. He didn't look at her. This was all his. "No, he died when I was 12, left us with nothing. This," she gestured around at the steel and glass, "is the opposite of that." He resumed polishing. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand what's at stake for me," she said, the vulnerability back in her voice. "It's not just a company, it's my life's correction. My revenge on the world that took him. I can't lose it, not over a memory." He finally stopped and looked at her. The work light cast harsh shadows on her face, but in them he saw the exhausted, determined woman from the bar. "I'm not trying to take anything from you, Clara. I never was. I just needed the work." She held his gaze, and for a moment the layers of CEO and socialite fell away. "I believe you," she whispered, and then, as if hearing her own weakness, she stiffened. "But belief isn't enough. Croft is asking questions. He has people watching. If he finds out anything, he'll use it." "So what do we do?" Leo asked, the we hanging heavily between them. "We are not a we," she snapped, the wall slamming back down. "You finish your work, you get paid, you leave, that's the deal." She turned to go, then stopped. "And stop working so late, it draws attention." She left him in the silence, but the fragile moment of understanding had changed something. The following day, a small, insulated lunch bag appeared on top of his toolbox. Inside was a still-warm turkey sandwich, an apple, and a juice box, the kind a kid would take to school. There was no note. He looked up toward the executive mezzanine, but the glass was tinted. He ate the sandwich, a confusing knot of emotions in his throat. The next crisis came from an entirely different direction. A local business journalist named Rebecca Shore, known for digging into corporate gossip, got a tip. An anonymous email claimed the illustrious CEO Clara Vance had a mysterious past entanglement that was influencing vendor selection on the flagship project. The tip was vague, but it named Walsh Finishes. Rebecca started digging. She found Leo's business license, his address. She saw he was a single father. She also found a single, grainy photo from a charity art show 7 years prior. In the background of a shot focused on a local politician, there was a younger Clara Simmons, hair down, smiling, standing next to a man who bore a striking resemblance to Leo Walsh. The photo was meaningless to anyone else. To Rebecca, it was a thread. She called Leo's business line. He listened to the voicemail that evening, his blood running cold. "Hi, Leo. This is Rebecca Shore with the Business Chronicle. I'm doing a piece on local subcontractors on big downtown projects. Would love to chat about your work on the Vance building. Also, I came across an interesting old photo I'd like you to verify. Give me a call." He played the message 3 times, then he deleted it. He sat in his dark kitchen, the only light from the street lamp outside. The pact was crumbling. The outside world was knocking. He had a choice: call Clara and warn her, which would further entangle them, or call the journalist back and try to navigate the minefield alone. Or he could do nothing and hope it blew over. But hope was a luxury he'd stopped affording a long time ago. He picked up his phone. His finger hovered over Clara's office number, which he'd secretly programmed in after the garage encounter. One call would pull him in deeper than he ever wanted to be, but silence might sink them both. He pressed the number. It rang once twice and was answered not by Clara but by her assistant, Ben, Ms. Vance's office. "It's Leah Walsh. I need to speak with her. It's urgent." "She's in a board finance committee meeting, Mr. Walsh. I can take a message." "Tell her it's about a reporter, Rebecca Shore, and an old photo." There was a beat of silence. "Hold, please." Less than a minute later, Clara's voice came on the line, tight and low. "What photo?" Leo relayed the voicemail word for word. The silence on the other end was profound. When she finally spoke, all the authority was gone, replaced by a thin thread of fear. "Where are you?" "Home." "Stay there. Do not answer that number. Do not answer any number you don't recognize. I'll call you back in 1 hour." The line went dead. The hour stretched like taffy. Leo paced his small living room, the shadows growing longer. Maya was at a friend's house for a sleepover, a stroke of luck that felt ominous. Precisely 59 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, an address in the warehouse district. A time, 9 p.m. Come alone. Side door. He arrived at a converted loft building, all exposed brick and silent freight elevators. The side door was unlocked. He took the elevator to the top floor, which opened directly into a vast, minimalist living space. Clara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, backlit by the city's glow. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair loose. She looked like a stranger. "This is my apartment," she said without turning. "The one the company doesn't know about, the one my husband has never seen." She finally faced him. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Rebecca Shore called my office directly 2 hours after she called you. She was more specific. She described the photo. She asked if I remembered the charity art show in November 7 years ago. She asked if the man in the background with me was, and I quote, 'your current controversial contractor.'" "What did you say?" "I hung up on her." Clara let out a shaky breath. "Then I called our legal counsel. He ran her name. She's a pit bull. She took down a city councilman last year with a story about misappropriated campaign funds. She doesn't bluff." Clara walked to a sleek desk, opened a laptop, and turned the screen toward Leo. It showed a scanned, grainy image from a society column. There they were. Younger, softer. Clara was laughing at something he'd said, her hand lightly on his arm. The intimacy in the captured moment was unmistakable. "This was taken the night we met," she said quietly. "I didn't even know it existed." Leo stared at the ghost of their past. "It's just a photo at a public event. It doesn't prove anything." "It doesn't have to prove anything," she snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "It just has to suggest asterisk. In the world I live in, suggestion is conviction. The headline writes itself. CEO's secret past with handyman contracts. The board, especially Croft, will use it to vote against my chairmanship. My husband will use it to invoke the morality clause. It's a spark, Leo, and my entire life is soaked in gasoline. So what's the plan? Buy her off?" "I can't. She's not that type. And any offer would be confirmation." Clara sank into a chair, looking utterly defeated. "My lawyer's advice was to preempt it. Issue a bland statement through the company PR channel acknowledging a casual, forgotten acquaintance from years ago, stressing that vendor selection is based solely on merit and threatening legal action for defamation if the story implies otherwise. It's the standard playbook, but it's a flare gun. It tells everyone something is worth hiding." Leo sat on the arm of a sofa, the weight of her world pressing down on him. "And where does that leave me?" "Exposed, scrutinized. Every aspect of your life, your business, your daughter will become fodder. They'll dig until they find something, anything, to make the story stick. A late payment, a permit issue, a disgruntled client from 5 years ago." She looked at him, a terrible empathy in her eyes. "You'll be collateral damage." The term was cold, clinical, and true. He was no longer a person. He was a risk variable in her crisis management matrix. The anger he'd been nursing ignited. "You brought this on us. With your ban, your panic, your secrets. I just wanted to paint a wall." "I know," she whispered, "and I am so sorry, but sorry doesn't unring the bell." She stood up, a new resolve straightening her spine. "There might be another way, a more dangerous one." "I'm listening." We give her a story, but not the one she's digging for. We give her a better one. Clara started packing, her mind racing ahead. We say we did know each other briefly years ago. We lost touch. You, struggling single father, built an honest business. Me, climbing the corporate ladder. The project comes up. You bid fairly. I, recognizing your name and your quality of work from back then, recuse myself from the selection process due to the prior acquaintance to avoid any appearance of favoritism. That's why your bid was initially rejected. Then, when a scheduling error brought you to the site, we had an honest conversation. I, impressed by your professionalism and your story, personally advocated for you to get a second look. The procurement committee reviewed and approved you on merit. You got the contract because you deserved it, not because of our past, but in spite of it. Leo processed the elaborate fiction. It was almost brilliant. It turned a secret affair into a minor footnote of ethical diligence. It turned her panic into integrity. It made her look noble and him honorable. It's a huge lie. It's a strategic narrative, she countered. It contains enough truth to be believable. It makes us both look good. It neutralizes the photo. It might even generate positive press. CEO gives single dad a fair shot. It's the only move that doesn't leave one of us bleeding in the water. And if she digs and finds out we're lying, that we didn't just know each other, then we're both finished, Clara said flatly. But she'd have to prove a negative. We stick to the script, we're consistent, and we sell it with conviction. We go to her together before she publishes. We control the narrative. It was a massive gamble. It required him to trust Clara completely, a woman who had already shown him how quickly she could sacrifice him for her own safety. But the alternative, doing nothing, meant certain disaster for his business and potentially dragging Maya into a tabloid mess. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow morning. Rebecca works fast. If we're not ahead of her by 9 a.m., the story she writes will be the one that burns us down. He left the loft feeling like he'd agreed to walk a tightrope over a canyon. He drove home, his mind churning. When he walked into his dark, silent house, the blinking light on his landline answering machine caught his eye. He rarely used it. He pressed play. Leo, hey, it's Mike from the Painters Union. Got a weird call today from some reporter asking about you. Wanted to know if you'd ever had any guild violations or complaints. Didn't give her anything, man, but heads up. Sounds like someone's digging. Call me back. The journalist was already widening her net. The clock was ticking faster than he'd thought. He poured a glass of water, his hand steady but his insides trembling. He thought of Maya's trusting face. He thought of the quiet pride of a job done well. All of it was about to be swallowed by a storm he didn't create. At 6 the next morning, his phone rang. Clara, we're out of time. She just emailed my office demanding a response by 10 a.m. or she runs the story with the photo and the phrase undisclosed conflict of interest. We have to move. My car will pick you up in 20 minutes. We're going to her office. The meeting was held in a cramped, cluttered conference room at the Business Chronicle. Rebecca Shore was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She didn't smile when they entered. Clara, back in a flawless navy suit, did the talking. She delivered their agreed-upon narrative with calm, practiced ease. She was contrite about the initial miscommunication, passionate about merit-based hearing, and almost maternal in her praise for Leo's dedication as a father and tradesman. She presented it as a feel-good story of redemption and second chances. Leo played his part, the humble craftsman given a break. He talked about his daughter, about building a business from nothing. He could see Rebecca's skepticism slowly being chipped away by the sheer, polished force of Clara's performance. The journalist took notes, her questions becoming less aggressive, more factual. After 45 minutes, she leaned back. It's a good story. Better than the one I thought I had. But I need to verify the recusal. I need to see the procurement committee minutes showing your non-involvement and their subsequent approval. A flicker of panic crossed Clara's eyes, so fast only Leo saw it. Those minutes didn't exist. Those are internal committee documents, Clara said smoothly. I can have counsel review what can be released. I'll need them by end of day tomorrow to kill my original piece, Rebecca said, standing, signaling the meeting was over. No documents, no new story. The old one runs. In the back of Clara's town car afterward, the facade crumbled. We have to create those minutes, she said, her voice hollow. Tonight. You mean forge them, Leo said. We have no choice. It's one document, we backdate it, we make it look real. My assistant Ben can access the templates. He's loyal. Leo felt the ground giving way beneath him. Each step to save themselves was a step deeper into illegality. Clara, this is fraud. And what's the alternative? She hissed. Ruin for both of us. For Maya, this is the cost of survival now. Are you in or are you out? He looked out the window at the city blurring past. He was in a car he didn't own, with a woman he barely knew, racing toward a crime to cover up a secret to save a lie. There was no way out. I'm in, he heard himself say. The forgery was executed with corporate precision. Ben, pale and sweating, used a secure printer in a satellite office. The document was convincing, filled with the right jargon, fake digital signatures from committee members who were conveniently traveling. It was emailed to Rebecca Shore at 7:58 p.m. the following morning. She emailed back. Received. Story killed. New piece running Friday. They had done it. They had spun straw into gold, poison into medicine. Leo felt no relief, only a deep, cold dread. Clara, however, was triumphant. She called him, her voice buoyant. We did it, she bought it. The story she's writing is about ethical procurement and supporting local family businesses. It's a win. But the universe, it seemed, demanded balance. 2 days later, as Leo was applying the final finish to Clara's own office ceiling, his phone rang. It was Maya's school. His daughter had been in a minor scuffle in the playground. A boy had teased her, saying her dad was in the newspaper for being a charity case who got his job because he was friends with the lady boss. Maya had pushed him. Leo left the site immediately. When he arrived at the school, Maya ran to him, her face buried in his paint-splattered shirt. He said you didn't earn it, Dad. That we're poor and you got help. The article wasn't even out yet, but the gossip, fueled by some leak, had already seeped into the second grade. He held his daughter, a fury boiling inside him. Who had talked? Ben. Someone at the paper. He drove Maya home, his mind racing. As he pulled into his driveway, a familiar black sedan was parked across the street. Arthur Croft got out, a thin smile on his face. Mr. Walsh, a word. Croft didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped onto Leo's small porch. I read a fascinating draft piece by a friend at the Chronicle. This new, heartwarming narrative, quite the pivot from the initial, whispers. He leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. I also had a very interesting chat with a very nervous young man in procurement named Derek. Before he was, let go, he mentioned something about a scheduling asterisk error that brought you to the site. An error that happened after the ban. He said the CEO was hysterical when she found out you were there. Croft's eyes gleamed. That doesn't sound like someone following ethical recusal procedures. That sounds like someone who was scared. Leo kept his face blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't, Croft said amiably. But here's what I think. I think you and Clara have a history she's desperate to hide. I think she banned you to keep you away, and when that failed, she concocted this little fairy tale to save her skin. And I think those committee minutes are as real as her concern for the little guy. He handed Leo a plain white business card. I don't want to destroy you, Mr. Walsh. You're a pawn. I want to checkmate the queen. Help me prove the document is forged. Testify to the real nature of your relationship, and I will make sure you keep the contract and are paid a very substantial bonus for your cooperation. Refuse, and when I expose her, you'll go down for fraud right alongside her. Your choice. He turned and walked back to his car. Leo stood on his porch, the card burning in his hand. The noose, which had seemed to loosen, was now tightening around his neck from a completely different direction. He had traded one threat for a more powerful, more ruthless one. He looked at his living room window where Maya was watching cartoons, innocent of the war raging over her father's life. He had tried to protect her by lying. Now, the lie was a weapon pointed at both of them. He had to talk to Clara. But this time, he wasn't sure if she was his ally or if she was about to become his enemy. The game had just changed, and the stakes were no longer just their careers or reputations. They were their freedom. Leo didn't call Clara. He went to her. He drove straight to the Vance Innovations building, Croft's business card a cold rectangle in his pocket. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't need one. The raw determination on his face parted the sea of assistants outside her office. Ben stood up, alarmed, but Leo walked right past him and pushed open the double doors. Clara was on the phone. She looked up, her expression shifting from annoyance to shock to fear in a single second. She hung up without a word. "Leo, what's wrong?" "Arthur Croft was just on my porch. He knows. He knows it's all a lie. He knows about the forgery." Leo's voice was flat, drained of all emotion. "He offered me a deal. Testify against you, confirm the real story, and I keep the money and stay out of jail. Refuse, and he buries us both." All the color drained from Clara's face. She slowly sank into her chair. "He can't prove the forgery." Ben was careful. "He doesn't need to prove it to the legal standard. He just needs to create enough smoke that the board fires you and the district attorney opens an investigation. My life gets dissected. Maya gets dragged through it. For what? To protect a lie that's already cracking." Clara put her head in her hands. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're out of moves, Clara. The game is over. He has us in checkmate." Leo walked to the window, looking down at the ant-like people far below. "I'm not going to prison for you, and I'm not going to be his weapon to destroy you either." "Then what is left?" Her voice was a broken whisper. "The truth," Leo said, turning to face her. "We go to the board before Croft does. We tell them everything. The past, the panic, the ban, the mistake, the cover-up, all of it." Clara stared at him as if he'd suggested setting himself on fire. "That's suicide. They'll crucify me. The morality clause, Thomas will leave me with nothing." "Maybe," Leo conceded. "Or maybe telling the truth first, taking full responsibility, is the only thing left that has any value. It's the only thing Croft can't weaponize. He's expecting us to keep lying, to dig the hole deeper. He's not expecting us to lay down the shovels." "And what about you? You admit to fraud, you could lose your business, your license." "I know," Leo said softly, "but I'll still have my daughter, and I'll have shown her that when you make a mess, you clean it up, even if it costs you everything." He held her gaze. "It's the only way either of us gets to look in the mirror again." Clara was silent for a long time. The office hummed with the silent energy of her crumbling empire. Finally, she spoke, her voice clear and strangely calm. "You're right." She picked up her phone. "Ben, schedule an emergency executive session of the board, 1 hour from now, all members in person. Tell them it's regarding governance and vendor integrity." She hung up. "We'll do it together." The boardroom was a temple of wood and silence. 10 men and women, including Arthur Croft, who couldn't hide his smug curiosity, and Thomas Vance, Clara's husband, who looked bored and impatient. Clara stood at the head of the table. Leo stood beside her, feeling every paint-stained inch of himself in that room of tailored suits. "Thank you for coming on short notice," Clara began, her voice steady but without its usual commanding edge. "I've called this session to make a full disclosure regarding the Walsh Finishes contract and my own conduct." She didn't use notes. She told the story from the beginning, the real beginning, meeting Leo 7 years ago, the chance encounter, the ban born of personal panic and fear for her position, the scheduling error, the attempted cover-up with the journalist, the forged procurement minutes. She named every lie, every moment of poor judgment. She implicated no one else. She said, "I'm more than she ever had in her career." When she finished, the silence was absolute. Thomas Vance's face was purple with rage. Arthur Croft's smugness had melted into confusion. His weapon had been taken and turned inward. Croft found his voice first. This is an astonishing admission of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. I move for immediate suspension pending a full forensic audit and legal review. Seconded, muttered another board member. Clara nodded. I anticipated that. Effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO and stepping down from the board. I will fully cooperate with any audit or investigation. I will also be submitting my resignation from my marital partnership, honoring the terms of our agreement. She looked at her husband, whose rage had cooled into a kind of grim satisfaction. She had just handed him everything he needed to eject her cleanly. Thomas Vance stood. The board accepts your resignation. An interim CEO will be appointed within 24 hours. This meeting is adjourned. He didn't look at her again. As the board members filed out, Croft lingered. He looked at Leo, a strange respect in his eyes. You had a deal on the table, a good one. Why would you do this? Leo met his gaze. Because the deal required me to be someone I don't want my daughter to become. Croft nodded slowly, then left. In the empty boardroom, Clara seemed to shrink. The power, the title, the armor, it all evaporated. She was just a woman who had lost everything in the space of 15 minutes. What now? She asked, not looking at him. Now we face the music, Leo said, separately. The fallout was swift and brutal. The Business Chronicle, tipped off by a furious Rebecca Shore who felt manipulated, ran the true story. It wasn't front page, but it was damning. Ousted CEO admits to fraud in contract scandal. Clara Vance became a cautionary tale. Her divorce was finalized quietly. The prenuptial agreement was enforced. She left with a modest settlement, but her name in the business world was mud. Leo's consequences were more personal. The district attorney reviewed the case. Given his cooperation, his clean record, and the fact he gained no financial benefit from the forgery, he was offered a deal. Restitution for the cost of the investigation, 500 hours of community service teaching trades to at-risk youth, and probation. His painting license was suspended for 1 year. Walsh Finishes was effectively closed. But a curious thing happened. The story of the single father who chose truth over a lucrative lie, even when it cost him his business, resonated. A local nonprofit that worked on housing for low-income families reached out. They had a grant for skills training. They needed someone to teach painting and drywall to their clients, helping them learn a trade. They offered him a job. It paid less, but it was steady, and it felt clean. 6 months after the boardroom confession, Leo was in a community center showing a group of teenagers how to cut a straight line with a brush. The door opened. It was Clara. She looked different. No power suits. Her hair was shorter. She looked tired but calm. She waited until the class was over. I heard about the program, she said. It's good work. It is, Leo said, wiping his hands on a rag. What are you doing here? I'm leaving the city, starting over, somewhere smaller. I'm using what's left of my settlement to buy a small commercial building. I'm going to turn it into affordable studio space for artists and craftspeople. She offered a faint smile. A correction, a different one. Leo nodded. That sounds honest. I wanted to see you before I left, to thank you. For what? Getting you fired and divorced. For forcing me to tell the truth, she said, her eyes earnest. I was so busy building a fortress, I didn't realize I was building my own prison. Losing it all, it was the only way I could breathe again. You were brave enough to do what I was too scared to do. You saved me from becoming a permanent ghost in my own life. They stood in silence for a moment, two survivors of the same shipwreck. How, Maya? Clara asked. She's good, proud of her dad, I think. She tells people I teach people how to build things now. Clara's smile reached her eyes this time. She's right. She handed him a small, folded piece of paper. If you ever need a reference, or if your students ever need space. It was her new email address. No corporate title, just her name. He took it. Good luck, Clara. You too, Leo. She turned and walked away, out of the community center and into her uncertain future. He watched her go, feeling no bitterness, only a strange, quiet peace. The final surprise came 2 weeks later. A certified letter arrived for Leo. It was from the law firm representing the now-dissolved Vance Innovations Executive Compensation Committee. Enclosed was a cashier's check. The amount was $50,000. The memo line read, "Payment in full, contract V1047 Walsh Finishes." Attached was a single-line note on plain paper, unsigned, for work completed, and for a lesson in integrity. AC. Arthur Croft had paid him, not as hush money but as a settlement, acknowledging that the work at least had been real, that Leo had in the end earned it. Leo used the money to pay off his remaining debts and put the rest in a college fund for Maya. He kept teaching at the community center. One afternoon, Maya was helping him clean brushes. She looked up at him, her small face serious. "Dad, are we poor now?" He knelt down, putting a hand on her shoulder. "We have everything we need, Maya. We have each other, we have this work, and we have a clean conscience. That's a different kind of rich." She thought about that, then nodded, satisfied. She went back to washing brushes, humming a song from school. Leo looked around the bright, messy room at the students starting to transform under their new skills, and he knew it was true. The secret that had unraveled everything had, in the end, woven something stronger in its place. Not a fortune, not a title, but a life that was finally completely his own. So what do we make of a story that began with a band and ended with a community center? On the surface, it's a tale of a secret, a lie, and the fallout. But dig a little deeper, and it becomes a map of the invisible fences we build between ourselves. The fence between the executive suite and the tradesman's van. The fence between the person we were and the person we pretend to be. The fence built from fear of what we might lose if we are truly known. Clara Vance built her fence to keep the world out and found herself imprisoned inside. Leo Walsh crossed a fence he didn't even see and found his entire life upended. Their collision wasn't just personal. It was a crash of two different Americas, operating on parallel tracks that were never supposed to meet. One track is built on image, perception, and the ruthless calculus of risk. The other is built on sweat, skill, and the simple arithmetic of making it to the next month. When they collided, both tracks were shattered. But from that wreckage, something unexpected was built. Not a fortune or a legacy, but something more rare: integrity. It's a word we throw around easily, but its cost is almost never shown. For Leo, the cost was his business, his immediate security. For Clara, it was her title, her marriage, her entire constructed identity. They paid in the currency of their former lives. And in return, they bought back something priceless: the right to look their futures in the eye without flinching. This story asks an uncomfortable question. How many of us are living behind a version of Clara's ban? How many decisions do we make? Who we hire, who we ignore, who we let into our lives, based not on merit or truth, but on a silent, screaming fear of a past mistake, a hidden chapter, a perceived weakness. We think we're managing risk. We're really just building taller fences and wondering why we feel so alone inside them. Leo's choice in the boardroom to tear the whole false structure down was more than bravery. It was a profound recalculation. He understood that the greatest risk wasn't losing the contract or even facing legal trouble. The greatest risk was teaching his daughter that survival meant becoming a person you don't respect. He traded temporary safety for permanent self-respect. And in doing so, he gave Clara the only gift that could actually save her: the permission to fail and to be free. Their story doesn't end with a fairy tale reunion or a sudden reversal of fortune. It ends with both of them in smaller rooms doing harder, humbler work. But it is work that belongs to them. Clara isn't curating an image, she's building a space. Leo isn't following a dispatch ticket, he's passing on a craft. The scale got smaller. The meaning got infinitely larger. The final, lingering image isn't of a dramatic confrontation or a tearful goodbye. It's of a paintbrush being washed clean in a sink, the water turning milky white, then running clear. It's the most basic act of the trade, cleaning your tool so it's ready for the next day's work. That's the quiet victory here. After the bans, the secrets, the forgeries, and the headlines, both of them finally got to clean their tools. To start again, with a clean conscience on a foundation of truth, however unsteady it may be. That foundation is all any of us really owns. Everything else, the titles, the contracts, the fortunes, can be taken away with a single memo, a single photograph, a single knock on the door. But what you build from a place of honesty, even if it's just a small, honest life in a community center, is yours forever. It is the one thing no one can ban, no one can unravel, and no one can ever take from you. So the next time you face a choice between a convenient lie and a difficult truth, remember the painter, the CEO, and the secret that set them both free. Remember that the most powerful act is sometimes not building your fortress higher, but having the courage to walk out of its gates into the uncertain, open air. Subscribe if you believe the most compelling stories aren't about winning everything, but about having the courage to lose what was never truly yours, to find what really is.